Unspoken Issues.
Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Unspoken Issues podcast. That's right, we have returned, and we are going to be talking the deadly foes of Spider-Man this evening. I'm not alone here. Over there is Dean Compton. Dean Compton, I think this is something you put on the list, and I want to know why.
Well, two reasons. Well, three reasons, really, I guess.
Okay.
Number one, I thought Derry would like it. Derry's a Spider-Man mark.
He is.
And this is a little corner of the Spider-Verse. I don't want to say gets brushed over, but it's nice to visit. Number two, I'm a fucking sucker for like I like supervillain team up. I like Doctor Doom and Astonishing Tales. I like supervillain team up MODOK's 11. I like Suicide Squad. We were just talking about that before we started. I like books that are about villains when they're well done. This is a book about villains that I find to be fairly well done, and so I wanted to share it. Number three. You're not a Spider-Man mark, but I thought you would like it too, Jesse.
Wow.
I was like, Jesse will enjoy this little jaunt off to the side, kind of like think about it like it's a JRPG, like if you were reading the Spider-Man books. This is a side quest. It's a side quest.
I know where you're going.
What I mean? Like, yeah, I see. Derry starts laughing like this is ridiculous, but like I'm making a lot of cogent points here, and I appreciate you, Jesse, for that. That's why I recommended it, because I was like, oh, Jesse will like this little side quest. Because a lot of the Spider-Man stuff we've done has been very on brand, like he's fighting Carnage or fighting whoever, Web of Carnage, Cosmic Carnage, etc. Here's a little something that's a little off the beaten path, and also I just thought about this too, but I really love the Beetle. I like the way the Beetle looks. I like the suction cup hands. I just think the Beetle's just got that classic look. I love the Rhino. The rest I could sort of take or leave. I don't hate them. I don't love them. But, I love those two guys. Arguably the most underrated Spider-Man villains you've got.
Okay. The Beetle gets a new costume in here. I don't have that in my synopsis, so I just kind of want to bring this up. But does he get a new costume, or is it just a replacement costume and it was the same before? Is this
it's a new costume that looks just like the old costume.
Oh, okay. That's what I was getting.
It's like 98% looks the same as far as aesthetics, but now he's like, these gyros work a lot better. And he's brought this, as far as stats go, again, let's go back to the JRPG. He upped his pseudoscience stats immensely with this suit, but it looks like the same suit.
Derry, I mean, early 90s, we are separated by a few years here, but I was actually collecting Spider-Man in the early 90s, and this series just I didn't see it either on the shelves or something caused this thing to get past me. So I know you weren't picking this up off the shelf, I assume. But at some point you read this prior to tonight, right?
Yeah. So I'm also a huge Beetle fan, and that's because of his starring role in Thunderbolts, which would come out a few years after this. And once I wanted to go back and read the rest of the appearances, there was this and the sequel series, Lethal Foes, were wrapped up in a comic book store I went to, and it was like, here you go, buy all 8 issues, super discount. I was like, well, I can't beat that. Yeah. And I read it, and I always tell people it's like the Reservoir Dogs of the Spidey villains, because it's them sitting around a table talking about the next job, dealing with the inner politics of being professional criminals, and I was hooked. I love it. In general, if Danny Fingeroth is writing a Spider-Man issue, I'll definitely pick it up. And I thought this had a lot of potential, and it does one of the few things. I think Dean kind of started talking about this, but Spider-Man's only in it for a little bit. If you're really interested in this characters, you get a full arc with them, which I thought was great. And then later on, this type of feel in some of the characters would inspire the Superior Foes of Spider-Man, which was so successful it went to be an ongoing, and I think that's one of the best things to come out of the Spider-Man universe.
So this creative team here, like I said, first off, publication date, it looks like it was in the May of 91 to August of 91. Our writer is Danny Fingeroth. Looks like our pencils are Al Milgrom and Kerry Gamble. Inks, we got some different inkers, I believe, throughout this story. It's 4-issue series. Mike Macklin. Al Milgrom steps in and helps out Mike there on issue 2. Yeah, inks become a combination of Milgrom, Macklin, and Candelario for our 4th issue. Letters by Joe Rosen and Dave Sharp. Colorist Patty Cockrum on the first 2 issues. And then the 3rd issue is Mike Thomas and Patty Cockrum comes back for our 4th issue.
I did not know Patty was still working for Marvel this late. I had no idea. She's Dave Cockrum from the X-Men, the new X-Men, like Claremont Cockrum. Like they were married. I think they got divorced somewhere. I knew she colored for Marvel in the 70s and 80s. I just didn't know. I don't know when she phased out or when she stopped. I just didn't know she was still doing work for Marvel at this time. So even you see, even you're at the head of the table, you can still find something new to eat.
That's right. Like I said, I hadn't had a chance to read this until tonight, so I'm excited to talk about it here. Let's go ahead. What I'll do is I'll do the first 2 issues, do a synopsis for those, and then we'll talk a little bit about what happened, and then we'll do the last 2 issues and finish up. Let's talk about the characters first. I think we all know who Spider-Man is. I mean, if you guys have any...
Miles Morales.
Yes, indeed. At this point in Spider-Man's timeline, is there anything important we should know? This is early 90s Spidey.
Spider-Man's hot.
Oh, yeah.
That's the number one thing you have to know is like... Yeah. The X-Men are like slightly hotter probably, but like, this is coming. This is around the McFarlane run. This is like the adjectiveless Spider-Man. Yeah. They're calling it's right after Cosmic Spider-Man, like all this stuff. The 91 card set that like won me over getting big into superheroes is coming out at this time. And that's the number one thing to know. I don't remember a lot of the storylines right now. Venom had just been introduced. We're kind of like in a period between periods, if that makes sense, unless I'm forgetting something. But they were still good. Spider-Man at this time is seen as a very creatively satisfying book month in, month out. And of course, at this point, there are 4 monthly Spider-Man books. And then also Marvel Tales, a million graphic novels and all this. So like Spider-Man was a cash cow then. And I always sort of was. But like, I think it's hard to understate how big Spider-Man was. Everywhere, every comic book store I would go into at this time, which means all 3 of them that I ever got to go to because it lived so fucking far away from anywhere. But they all like prominently displayed Spider-Man and the X-Men like together. Like it was seen as like Spider-Man and the X-Men. I mean, they fucking released like a Super Nintendo game like a year after this, 2 years after this, that is Spider-Man and the X-Men, and it is not very good. But that's the biggest thing I can remember, Derry, if you can remember any particulars, but mostly just, they were just kind of on a roll, and this was a period, if I remember correctly, they were just letting, I don't mean this in a bad way, letting momentum carry it until they got to the next big.
Yeah, this is, we're decidedly out of the 80s, and Dean's absolutely right. The big things are coming, but for right now, it's just, here's as much content as you can possibly get. And it's funny too. There's not a lot of we did Punisher Pariah not too long ago, and there was a caption box that said something along the lines of Spider-Man's got 17 ongoing books. You can pick up literally any of them.
There is literally a newsstand in your room that is selling Spider-Man right now.
But here it's more generic. Here he shows up, he doesn't do anything specific, and he swings out. And yeah, I think it's we're lucky because, I may love the Clone Saga, but it would be very confusing. And in a lot of ways, this thing is readable 30 years later because it doesn't reference a lot of other stuff. It's like, here's some bad guys that dressed in ridiculous costumes. You very quickly know what they want, and you can move on with your life. So it's another reason I would definitely recommend it.
The clone caveat, though, is I do feel like, I'm not saying anybody would think it was a masterpiece now, but if corporate hadn't pressured them to keep it going because sales were good, they kept it going like 6 months longer than originally intended, it would be held up in a much higher esteem now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the original plan was really good. It was just a question of, are you going to allow this to end and to move on to the next thing, or you're going to try to have your cake and eat it too. And it went on too long, like any other story from that period. I mean, they were in very good company.
They had to keep sales up because they were losing money on Fleer. So
there you go.
Read Comic Wars, everybody.
The cruel economics that defined the 90s for everyone.
I'll feel your pain. That's Bill Clinton, y'all.
Next up,
Marvel hurt.
Next up, the Sinister Syndicate. So I will run down our villains here that make up the Syndicate. Number 1, leading the pack, is Abner Jenkins, the Beetle. I mean, really, what you get throughout this story is that he's kind of like the guy that plans things. He's the guy that's getting things together, and we're going to do this heist in order to make this amount of money. They have it listed here as he's an inventor, but it seems like he's relying on the Tinkerer for a lot of this. You could find that early in the story. He goes to get a suit as soon as he gets out of jail.
There was a reference when he sees the Tinker in the first one. He says, "Well, we worked on these plans together." So I read that more as like, I'm the Beetle. I'm a pretty good engineer, which in the Marvel Universe means I can build a suit that gives me super strength and flight. And the first thing that I do is try to rob a bank instead of just patenting it and, living off the revenue from that.
Or making an inferior version of it, selling it to the defense industry, and then you can always have a parts thing. You're like, well, yeah, I didn't realize that screw wouldn't work. We'll make that screw right up, Uncle Sam. That's where the real money is.
So I just took it as he just got out of jail. He didn't necessarily have a workshop. And the Tinkerer's whole thing is like, yeah, I'll build your super science nonsense. Okay. I'm getting 10% of every job until we're clear, though. So
yeah, for me, it's kind of like that. It's like the reason, chefs go out to eat. It's quicker and easier for him to just have this guy do it at this point, and they're in the same business together to an extent, so he can just, tell him, hey, here's some schematics, here's this. I don't want vibranium here. I want it to be sympanium or what the fuck ever. And they would be able to talk to each other about it. But like, he didn't want to go out and have to find a place. He probably has no money. Like, it's not like he made this out of like, Kleenex and popsicle sticks. You know what I mean? You need raw materials. You need a place to process them. And I figured that's why he had him do the heavy lifting as opposed to doing it himself.
Okay. Bring up the Tinker is good too, though, because there's an early reference in the first issue where Spider-Man says, "Oh man, I recognize that design. All my bad guys are networking." So I like that this is one of the earliest instances of this idea of like the supervillain underground, right? Like the Shocker's afraid he's going to get killed by Scourge, or the Punisher, the Tinker is a presence, the Kingpin is a presence. Like, I love this idea, whether it's Marvel, DC, or like before I mentioned Reservoir Dogs, like the underworld's got its own story that you're only glimpsing parts of when Spider-Man's punching them in the mouth. And those stories are so good because more often than not, you see that, except for a couple of big fish, they're working stiffs, right? Like this story, the Deadly Foes, wouldn't work with the Sinister Six because they are all huge movers and shakers. They all have their own complex plans. They're millionaires. They're doing this for fun. And these are the other guys, right? Like, even though the Speed Demon is as fast as the Flash, he still wants money. He still wants to get the girl. He's still an idiot. Like, I love stories like that because these guys are much more relatable than, a guy who can build a nuclear reactor out of what he finds under the couch cushions. So.
Next up is Boomerang, Fred Myers. Don't know much about this character. I think isn't he like palling around with Spider-Man like recently?
We don't talk about the Nick Spencer run. I may have mentioned Superior Foes before.
Yeah, don't ever talk about Nick Spencer.
That is a very good book, but I can't in good faith talk about his Amazing Spider-Man run. It physically hurts me.
Okay. Well, how about
like Nick Spencer?
How about this? Listen, get him right behind Jason Aaron. Get you barbed wire bat.
I don't know which one of them fucked the Punisher more. I tell you what.
Oh shit! Well, somebody tell me about the Boomerang at this point. I mean, essentially, all I got from this guy is he's got.
I think he was on the Mets, if I'm remembering.
He played baseball and then threw boomerangs. That's basically it. I think he gambled or something.
I think he like bit on himself or something. I don't know. He's a baseball guy. He did some nonsense like that. But he's the weirdest character because he's got the same exact abilities as Bullseye, right? Like they've established that. There's this whole thing in here where it's like if you give him a paper clip, he can kill you with it and can move on with his life. And then later on, there will be a backstory added to Bullseye about how he also played baseball. It's the weirdest thing. They're like pretty much the same character. This guy does not have like an Australian accent or anything.
No, there's no reason for him to like have a boomerang at all. No, I mean, listen, I don't want to sound like I'm discriminating against people based on their national origin, but like, why does he have a boomerang? Why isn't he like the closer and have like a baseball? You know what I mean? Like I don't understand why the boomerang.
Well, it's so arbitrary, and
I mean, but boomerangs are cool. That's probably the answer.
Well, you're right. You are right there. That is, anybody could throw a baseball. All right.
right. Anybody. All right, I know they don't listen to this show, so I'm gonna tell you a secret.
Oh, goodness. Oh, man.
Someone in my family likes to tell tall tales.
Okay.
And they told me once that they were like, yeah, I was a pitcher in high school because I like baseball, huge baseball fan, to the point where like we don't have any shows scheduled in October because like every second that I have will be dedicated to watching postseason baseball and horror movies. October is a big month.
That's
And
right.
he was like, yeah, I played high school baseball, trying to impress me. I was like, yeah, that's cool, man. He's like, I was a pitcher. And I was like, cool. I played catcher, what the fuck ever. And he's like, I was pretty good, not great. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, you didn't go past high school, so yeah. And then he goes, I could throw the ball fast, not too fast, like 95 miles an hour.
Oh, my God.
Only 95 miles an hour at age of 17. Like, the motherfucker, like, now listen, 95 is not as big a deal in the majors as it used to be, but for every 17-year-old who throws 95, it's a big fucking deal. So, like, what the fuck? Like, there's 8 million people in the world. Let's say 3,000 of them could possibly throw a baseball 95 miles an hour. Most of them play baseball or football. You know what I mean? Like, or there's probably some guy in like the Central African Republic who like fucking has thrown walnuts or something forever who can throw them 95 miles an hour. He doesn't know. We just don't know. You know what I mean? But like most people with that ability at the age of 17 wind up in some kind of occupation, some place where they would take advantage of such an incredible skill, as opposed to telling me fucking tall tales while you're drinking all my goddamn beer.
Well,
that has nothing to do with the Deadly Post of Spider-Man. That's the Deadly Post of Dean Thompson.
That's great. All right, next up, Alexei Sytsevich. I'll go with. How's that? A Rhino. I got Sytsevich is the last name.
No idea.
I didn't either.
Just call it
Alexei.
Rhino.
Rhino is part of the Sinister Syndicate. Listen, folks, if you are trying to envision a superhero as a Rhino, you're probably right. I mean, it's basically a guy in a big Rhino suit, but the suit is apparently like fused to his
like
skin.
Grafted to him or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Derry, you already mentioned the Speed Demon, James Sanders here, a low-level crook Flash. He's really fast.
No, literally the Flash. The Speed Demon has one of the most complex and stupid origins of all time.
Oh, boy.
He is the Wizard from the Squadron Sinister from way back when, who was an evil version of the Flash that Marvel could publish. And he just hung around for a long time, and eventually someone was like, well, it's weird that we actually have a Flash character, we're not doing anything with it, we're just going to change his name because the Wizard's a terrible name, and he became a random Spider-Man villain. But if you actually look through his entire thing, if you go back and read the Squadron Supreme series, the superhero in that book is the Wizard, aka James Sanders, and later he gets called the Blur, but it's the same character. It's wild. It's just like he's not even from this earth. It's never mentioned. No one seems to care, but I got curious one day, so I looked it up. He has the most ridiculous origin. It's never brought up.
Now he's just like, he's like a jerk like Quicksilver, but like a womanizer like Hercules. Who cares about his past? This guy's just like running around, patting ladies on their butt. You know what I mean? Like, so I wouldn't bring it up either. If that was my origin, I would not bring it up, because it's like when somebody asks me where I'm from. I was born in Springfield, raised in Arkansas, lived 14 years in Atlanta. I don't fucking know where. I don't want to say.
That's fair. That's fair.
At the same time, what the fuck, bro? You're 100% right. Like what the fuck? But you know what? We just accepted it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that is not hinted to whatsoever in this book. That's for sure. They have definitely decided that was something that he wasn't going to hang his hat on at all.
And you don't need to know
what would it do him?
You don't. No.
You don't. I mean, listen. You don't need to be reading this like random crime comic and be thinking to yourself, man, this guy used to be friends with the Grandmaster. That's kind of weird. That's a weird thing that happened.
Like, oh shit, Roy Thomas created this guy. Sort of, because it's just a ripoff.
Yeah, Roy Thomas was like, wouldn't it be cool if they fought the Justice League? And then he was like, I wonder how far I can get this before someone sends a cease and desist order. Turns out you can get pretty far.
Yeah, yes, you can.
I think honestly, like, I think the line for them is like really other media. you'll notice you don't see those guys in cartoons or on the movies. And if you did, they'd probably be changed quite a bit. They might use the name Hyperion, but for them to like make a Hyperion movie that was just Superman, I don't know that they're gonna do. That's probably where the line would be drawn.
I would love if they did an MCU movie called Squadron Supreme and they just cast Henry Cavill as Hyperion, just straight up. Just
that'd be hilarious.
Didn't even try to change it. Just put him in almost the exact same costume.
Grant Gustin is the Wizard.
Yeah, exactly. And Ben Affleck is Nighthawk. Yeah.
Gal Gadot is Power Princess.
Yeah, exactly. You you slightly change the costume. You could let I don't remember the actor who portrayed Cyborg, but you could let him be like, I don't know, Dr. Spectrum or something. Just bring them all.
Something, right?
That sounds right. Yeah, I'm not a huge DCEU guy. So,
this reminds me though of like what is arguably the best moment in JLA Avengers when Hawkeye meets the Justice League and he's like, these guys remind me of somebody. I can't put my finger on it. And like two minutes later, he's like, oh yeah, the Squadron Supreme.
Yeah.
You losers.
Yeah.
As it turns out, no. But also,
yes. From their point of view, that's absolutely true.
Right.
Next up is Hydro Man Morris Bench, the villain who is able to transform his body into water. He is part of the Sinister Syndicate here. As far as parts go, he just kind of plays his part as the thug, I guess you'd say. Nothing major here, but a thug, I should say.
Money and food.
Yep. You can't really
get out of this.
Yeah, you can't really.
In the comics, is he marry Jane's abusive ex-boyfriend as well, or is that just on the cartoon? Because I haven't read a lot of Hydro Man, but I remember that episode of the cartoon.
I have to be completely honest with you. I remember when that was introduced in the show, and I was like, oh, okay, that's his deal. But in all the years I've been reading comics, I have never read any mention of him with Mary Jane, so it could be something that is his origin. I've just never bothered to look it up. He's the most generic character. It's like he's just
we don't have Sandman, so we'll get Hydro Man. I'm sorry, because we were saying the same thing. Great minds. Yep. Me and you, Derry, we're running this thing. You know that, right? Jesse's in the caboose. He's smoking like a Black and Mild. Me and you.
That's right. Jesse
is our glue.
Keep it together. Layla. I'm going to go with Layla. What do you guys think?
Layla.
Yeah, I would say Layla.
All right.
Eric Clapton's Layla.
This is Boomerang's girlfriend, who I assume this has got to be her first appearance. I didn't look it up, but I mean, it felt like it to me. But Boomerang's girlfriend shows up, and she's going to be the getaway driver for these guys. She's going to play a very important role here in the book, though. There's your Sinister Syndicate right there.
She's the only one they could get. They couldn't get like the dude from US1 or something.
In Superior Foes, they use Overdrive, who's super
Overdrive rules. I love that guy. What a great power. I don't mean to cut you off, but yeah, he can drive anything. That's his power. What a great power. I wish I had that power. I would totally steal a nuclear submarine. Like, I would absolutely do that and, like, blackmail the fucking nation. Like, you could not stop.
There's a recurring gimmick where he turns random objects into a Segway so he could just quickly escape from the scene of a crime. And it's in the background half the time, and I laugh every time. It's like, it's such a stupid gimmick, and I'm like, nope, you're the best getaway driver. That's the one thing you do. You're the super powered getaway driver, and you're very good at it.
But again, you would wonder why this guy's like, it's not a power that like say you're Cyclops. Like, people can like be like, man, your eyes are red. There's something fucking up with you, brother. You know what I mean? Or something like, there's no overt giveaway that you would have this power. So why aren't you like driving F1 and making $1 trillion and hanging out with all the supermodels and like dumping champagne over yourself like every freaking like week on F1? Like, how much more money could you make doing this than you could driving F1?
That's beautiful. I'm looking. I had to look up Overdrive there just for a second to see what I was missing. It's pretty crazy.
Not to be confused with Maximum Overdrive.
No. All right. So just to kind of also bring up the Shocker, who is currently in jail at the time this book starts, petrified. Actually, we're brought in by a nightmare that the Shocker is having of the Scourge. Which, by the way, let's talk about the Scourge real quick. This is this is the same Scourge that was in Captain America comics, running around killing people.
It's the same idea, but there have been like, I think in that comic, he got killed by a Scourge.
Okay.
Who also may have gotten killed by another Scourge.
Okay.
And then later in Thunderbolts, like Nomad is the Scourge, I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Spoiler! Nobody gets done dirty later, y'all. It's sad. But yeah, I don't know if this is the first Scourge or the second, because I don't know exactly when all that goes down, but it's the same idea, pump squack.
I mean, the Scourge is essentially, other than this nightmare sequence, he's not going to really be showing up, and he didn't really show up in the book anyway because it's a nightmare sequence. But what I'm saying is that he's out there, and the Shocker's terrified. The Shocker is Herman Schultz, by the way. He's absolutely petrified that he is going to die at the hands, and I think he feels that jail is somewhat safer than the outside, although he's worried that there's still people inside that might try to get to him too as well.
Especially if he keeps waking them up.
Right.
I love that the Shocker's defining character trait in this book is just that he has like anxiety. Like he's in jail.
PTSD.
No one cares about him, but he is in jail. The guards are making fun of him. The other prisoners are making fun of him. No one has any, they don't feel bad for him at all. And this guy is just having panic attacks about this, guy. He's just famous enough that the Scourge is going to find him and murder him. And he's not even wrong, but it's so funny to me that he doesn't really do anything other than have these panic attacks, and everyone's just making fun of him for it. It's just so dark.
I wish that we could meta help him, because I'm bro, you're safe. You're kind of too big to get killed by the Scourge. You're probably just past the line. I'm not, in baseball terms, you're not a 300 hitter, but you're solid 260, 265. Nobody, the Scourge kills guys who are batting 210. But we can't tell him that. That would, we know, but he could.
The Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, not a huge role in this story, other than the fact that he may have been pulling the strings. Yeah, I say that with tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I was gonna say not a huge role in the story, or the hugest role in the story.
The reason the story happens.
The only larger role in the story is Rhino, right? Literally larger, but otherwise.
Yeah. So we all kind of know the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk. I know the Kingpin has been around a while at the time the early 90s roll around, but my goodness, I remember it was probably because I was collecting the Punisher and collecting Spider-Man at this time, or bringing some of those issues in. But the Kingpin felt like he was everywhere to me for some reason, and I think that's just because he was such a prolific villain.
This is right before they're going to do the Last Right storyline in Daredevil. He's appearing here. Remember, Euro Hit is about a year after this. He was very prominent at this time. Yeah, he's in the 90s. He's in every card set at the time. I'm a big Kingpin, Mark. I love the guy. I love the line where they're if somebody sells a dime bag in Miami, Kingpin gets his cut.
He gets his cut.
He gets his cut somewhere along the way. And that cut, you're wow, how much does he get? It might be half a penny, but they sell a lot of dime bags, brother. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I love that. And as I've said on this show before, and I say every chance I get, this is my headcanon, and I've yet to meet anybody who disagrees with it. But one day, and we don't know when, but we know one day, Frank's going to shoot the Fat Man. That's just all there is to it. He's just going to one day he's going to you know what? Today's the day. And he's just going to go kill Kingpin. And that's it. And Punisher may die in the process, but that will happen in my headcanon. One day he'll just be gone.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Issue 1. The Sinister Syndicate plans a heist at the Federal Reserve. Trying to reach Boomerang's girlfriend, Layla, who awaits in the van as the getaway driver, the team attempts an escape. However, they encounter Spider-Man, leading to a fierce battle. The Syndicate considers killing Spider-Man, but Rhino intervenes to prevent the murder. Boomerang, one of the members, attempts to kill Spider-Man after their escape, but ends up trapped under some debris. Meanwhile, tensions within the Syndicate rise when Kingpin's assistant takes their heist money, leaving the team frustrated but reluctantly deciding to keep their leader, Beetle. The issue ends with the Syndicate planning to confront Spider-Man. The Sinister Syndicate in issue 2 continues its criminal activities, targeting a gold shipment without any issues. Internal conflicts emerge, with Rhino wanting to leave the group and Speed Demon revealing his desire to keep Boomerang in prison. Layla has stayed with the team. However, the reader is made aware she may have other motives for remaining. Boomerang's trial begins, but he's soon rescued by the Syndicate after he's pronounced guilty, leading to a confrontation again with Spider-Man. The issue concludes with the Syndicate regrouping and Spider-Man tracking them to an abandoned warehouse where he finds the DA is tied to a massive bomb. And that's where we end issue 2.
I feel really bad for the Sinister Syndicate because, like, every time they run into Spider-Man, it's like a goddamn accident. Like, they're like speeding through the crime. He's like, oh, you almost hit me. And then, like, later on, he's gonna like try and get a cab that the Shocker wants. Like, what the fuck? New York is huge. If you've never been to New York, like Manhattan is huge, okay? You know, like, Gary knows what I'm talking about. The idea that you would continually run into these same people, like, again and again, that you're not trying to run into is wild. It's wild. So I think, so that's, you know, funny to me. The first 2 issues get things going. It's nice to, I like Rhino a lot. I like the whole, he's trying to go straight angle. I think it's funny that Speed Demon is such a, you know, a sniveling ass. He's like, I'll just sniveling ass bastard. I'll just steal my buddy's girlfriend while he's in jail. It's funny too. The Beetle's obviously a very smart guy. Did you go to college? Because if you go to college, they make you take a psychology class, Psychology 101. And if you took that class, you would know it would be much better to tell these people on the front end. They would probably understand.
Right.
I mean, I know they're not because they're nice, understanding people who, you know, oh, I've got your back, brother. But it's like, well, we're going to make a lot of money. He's like, listen, Kingpin wants all this. He doesn't have to say he's paying back a debt. He can just be like, I've set this up, but in order to make this happen, Kingpin wants all the money. And then later we can do whatever. We just got to give him 10%. And I feel like it would have worked, but he doesn't think that way because he's a creep. I really like the art. I'm not usually a big Al Milgrom fan, but I think this stuff is really, really good. And all in all, it's just, like I said, it's nice to see what Jerry was talking about earlier. You just normally kind of just barely scratch this world. And it's cool to see these guys interact and bust on each other, what friendship means or doesn't mean to them. If that's probably my only real complaint about the whole book is that, like, none of them have any, like, friendships. Like, really, it's all just, you know, it's very Machiavellian. It's how useful can you be to me at this time or whatever. And I feel like people develop friendships even within, like, the confines and context of underworld situations. And it seems hard for me to believe that these guys would have worked together for so long to the point where, like, you know, like 2 of them weren't buddies. You know, kind of like the scene where it's in, like, the Cabal, which was like the answer to the Illuminati with, like, the Hood and Doom and White Queen and Namor way later on. And, like, everybody leaves except Doom and Namor, and, like, they talk about what they think about the whole thing because they've established this, like, you know, if not friendship, but, like, incredible respect for one another. And you would think that after all these guys had done, at least 2 of them would have that kind of a bond. You know, that's not what happens. It's not a major complaint. It's not like the story sucks because of it. But I just feel like I would have gotten more emotionally invested if I had gotten to see a little more of that. I find the driver character to be pretty boring, to be honest, until like the very last issue, and then she's cool as hell. But, like, these first 2 issues, everything's just getting set up, so she can't really do anything. It's not her fault.
A lot of what I got out of these first 2, it felt like we were following a lot of the struggles of the Beetle, who is trying to leave these guys. And actually, I think at one point he thinks about leaving them to the cops, I believe. I can't remember if that's happening here, if that's in the next 2. But either way, he is struggling with the fact that, you know, he has his own motivations, but he wants to be a leader of this team, and he wants the team obviously to succeed. So a lot of his inner dialogue is him worrying about, like, well, what should I do next to make sure that these guys are taken care of, or what should I do to make them believe in me? Because they all start losing faith in him, and that clearly bothers him.
That's the kind of core that enables him to make the face turn in Thunderbolts, is that he's already demonstrated that, like, on some level he understands responsibility and caring about people to an extent, you know?
Yeah. But also, like, he fails a lot. You know, like, it's got to be said, like the Beetle's defining characteristic as a character is the guy can't win. Like, he's not as smart as Doc Ock. He doesn't have that vicious streak, but he's smart. Like, he can build all of this crap, and he figured out how to rob the Federal Reserve. Like, he should be that, like, top tier villain. He just can't make it work. And part of it is exactly what Dean says, because every time he gets in a room full of people, he does the absolute dumbest thing you could possibly imagine. So when he's finally on the Thunderbolts, you know, he doesn't become a good guy because like there's nothing left, becomes a good guy because he's in love, right? And he realizes like, well, I'm really good at a couple of things. Being a criminal mastermind ain't one of them. But if we, if we kick Baron Zemo out, if we get this Nazi arrested, that girl might like me, and then I could turn around. And then, every time you see him now, he's like working for Shield or something. He's like repairing helicarriers. He's boring, but he has a good, decent life. And part of that is he finally realized, like, I'm not going to be Reed. I'm not going to find the next negative zone, but I can make a connection with a person and make sure that her flight harness is always working while she's, Songbird's like a major superhero in most stories. So
now, you earlier mentioned the Reservoir Dogs, which is a movie I like, but I'd love for you, Derry, to kind of talk about that, and then feel free to talk about your notes for the first 2 issues as well.
I really like this book, and a lot of it is because I like what it establishes, and I like what it sets up more than the actual thing. Dean made a great point, which is, the book doesn't leave enough time for the characters to focus on their relationships. It's really plot heavy. The first 2 issues and second 2 issues, like it's just jammed in. But like I mentioned before, other series will expand on this idea. The lethal foes, the superior foes. Superior foes is mostly just these characters sitting around BSing.
Playing cards.
They a lot of cards, a lot of, how are we going to rob this guy to pay back this guy? And they're just, they're whatever. But yeah, for me, it goes back to the Reservoir Dogs scene where, at the beginning of the movie, they're sitting around the table at the diner and they're BSing and they're talking, and you see the different personalities and you see how they're going to clash in the remainder of the movie. But there is one person in charge, right? The character of Joe is able to pull them all together and say, you do this job. You do it the way I laid out.
This waitress.
You tip the waitress, you do what I tell you, you do it in the way that I tell you, and then when we're done, we'll go back to this. And I like that here because you're seeing the origin of that without that extra piece. Beetle thinks he could be that or maybe that, but he can't read a room. He keeps making these really bad decisions. But I love it. Like I said before, I'm 100% down for the other guys, the characters who decide I can be a supervillain. I live in the Marvel universe. I invented vibro shock gauntlets or whatever the hell the Shockers got. So I'm going to be a supervillain, even though it doesn't make any sense. It makes me feel good about myself. But you see that it doesn't really get them there, right? Like one of my favorite bits in this series is how the Speed Demon is always asking Layla to call him James. But he's wearing a ridiculous costume when he says that. It's not like he's sitting there without the mask on or something you could picture in a television show. He's dressed like the Reverse Flash, and he's sitting there being like, no, you can call me James. And it's so funny to me because these guys can't get out of their own way. And even the Rhino, right? The Rhino is like, maybe not a top shelf villain, but he's pretty close to the top. He's created by Stan Lee, John Romita Sr., same as the Shocker, ironically, but pretty good, well-known character. And here he's constantly like, I want to get out of this because it has given me nothing of value. And you see that while he's the only one who approaches the level of like, hey, we might have use for this guy, they won't let him out. And I feel like that's another big crime thing where it's like, no, you're just good enough that you're going to continue making the rest of us money. And I love it. I want more of that. I want this idea of like, this is what these guys get up to when they're not fighting Spider-Man for the 5 pages of their story. We always hear Spider-Man's ridiculous inner monologues and they go on and on and on and on and on. And here, this is cool to see it from the other side of the table where it's like when they're fighting Spider-Man, big monologues, but for the most part, it's just sitting in the back and going like, how do I get the next score? How do I stay out of jail? How do I not get shot in the head by Frank Castle?
Good luck with that one.
The other thing
I think he could have gotten away with Jim. Like you can't ask somebody to call you James when you look that ridiculous. But he was like, "Hey, call me Jimmy." All right, I'll call you Jimmy. Yeah, sure. What the fuck? But like, no, not James. That's very formal for a man with a skull cap on right now, right? So, and yeah. I think the Rhino is the bridge.
Yeah.
Like as far as like what the A-list and like B-list Spider-Man villains are, I think he's an A-lister, but he's like the A- lister. He's the one. If you're going to be an A-lister, you've got to climb past Rhino.
It's funny with the Jim and James thing because I actually thought something similar. It's so tiny, but when the Beetle is a Thunderbolt under the super name of Mach 1, Kurt Busiek makes a point of having the other characters call him Abe. And it's such a small thing. But once you get into the nickname territory, the characters become more relatable. For these 4 issues, he's constantly called Abner. You know, he's just, that's Abner, that's Abner. And sure, that's the name he had in his first appearance, like way back in the early 60s. But you don't really get to know
The last time someone was named Abner.
Yeah,
Probably.
it's like we couldn't even pronounce Rhino's real name. I think at some point someone decides it's just Alex, but it's the same thing. It's like
I did want to talk a little bit about the Rhino just to kind of throw out my one note out of this, and I think I mentioned it in the synopsis. Rhino intervenes and tells the other guys, "Hey, I'm not taking part in a murder here. I don't want to murder Spider-Man."
Not
That's
right now, anyway.
I was going to say that seemed like a pretty noble thing to do, I guess, as far as villains go. I don't want to murder this guy, even though he's been a complete thorn in our sides this whole time.
Well, it was self-serving. He's like, I don't want a murder rap. I don't want an accessory to murder rap. I'm trying to fucking go straight. Like there's that. Those are heavy charges. You know, like they'll cut. Like listen, he owes some money. Well, he's the Rhino. Like he stole some money. He runs off to Mexico. Well, good. He's gone. Murder. They're gonna keep looking for you. It's a murderer. Accessory to murder, they're going to keep looking for you. So he didn't want that smoke. I mean, it was still somewhat noble, though.
Yeah, well, the big thing that I get out of this is like the Rhino just wants to get the money so he can get that damn suit off, which while you're reading this, and I don't think I have it in the synopsis at the end, so we'll have to bring it up. But while you're reading this, you're thinking to yourself, okay, that's really all he wants. This guy just wants out. One more job, and then I'm done. That's the plan.
I love that it opens up with this dream sequence, because, you know, we were talking before about the environment that this book came out, and what a great, you know, if you're sitting there and you're deciding whether or not to buy it, and you open up the cover and the Punisher is just there, and it's like, well, I guess I got to get this thing. But it's just this dream sequence. Again, it's just him having this freaking panic attack. I thought that was a great cold open. The Shocker's so great in this book because, you know, in my head I just think, well, you know, he's a member of the Sinister Syndicate, but he's technically not. He's just not. No, he's just a part of the book that everyone is playing with. But, I love him. I love when you can take a character who's just never had that great moment and really figure out something interesting to do with him that no one else is doing. And for the Shocker, it's this nonsense. Like in Ultimate Spider-Man, they did something similar where whenever they needed a character to get arrested at the beginning of an arc, the Shocker would just show up. Like he never had his own storyline, and Teenage Spider-Man would always make fun of him, or like call him the Vibrator or something. And I love the uses for that because it makes the world feel a little bit more lived in. So I really thought that was great. I also I know before you guys said that you didn't find the character of Layla very interesting. I don't know that she has the best arc here, but I do like the fact that we're given her as a POV character, because all these other characters, they've got tons of appearances and complex continuity and whatnot. And not that they dwell on it, but for a lot of times you're seeing it through Layla's point of view. And while the reveal of the Ringer as her boyfriend isn't all that great, I do like the idea that she's
with the Ringer.
I mean, but she's like effortlessly stringing these guys along. I do like that. I like the fact that this guy's
I think she gets better as it goes along. I think the first 2 issues, all she does is there's a little hint that something's up, but mostly what she does is cry over Boomerang. They'd be like, I'm not really crying over Boomerang. Not really.
Yeah, it's like no one's crying over Boomerang, Layla. I get that.
That was the other thing I wanted to say about the first 2 issues. Like Boomerang gets captured or whatever. He is absolutely right. If he doesn't have any powers, he should not be kept in a cell for people with powers. That is wrong. It doesn't matter how good he is at throwing things. If he's not a mutant or he's not a cyborg or doesn't have superhuman powers, it is an abrogation of his civil liberties for him to be kept in a cell that is designed for people with superpowers. And there needs to be investigative work done into what that could do, what kind of trauma that could cause a prisoner, because that, that's serious stuff.
Really now? Really?
Really? What? No, of course y'all, we've done a million of these. Come on. Of course I side with someone's civil liberties.
You're right. What was I doing? Question.
I think he has superpowers. I was very confused by that.
Well, that's the thing. If he does have superpowers, but he says he doesn't. The cops say he doesn't. Then he doesn't. Then what are we doing here?
But he's in a laser field. He flicks that pen, and like it hits and it like he's in like these gauntlets, and later on he kills a guard with like a bunch of quarters. Like he clearly has a superpower.
Cool,
like
right?
He doesn't have a genetic marker that says like I'm an X-Man, but it's like, this is the Marvel universe. You could trip over a guy in the subway who used to be Conan's drinking buddy 500 years ago. He's not going to show up as a mutant. He just learned magic. Like,
Well, if you have magic, you need to be contained. I understand that.
That's what I'm saying, but that's not genetic.
I'm not saying he should be in Gen Pop.
Okay.
All right. I'm not saying, but like this is a cell that is specially designed for people with superpowers. That's weird. Like it probably has some kind of power dampening stuff. What does that do to a normal person? What kind of exposure is? Listen, Matt Murdock would be on my side here. He would absolutely beat She-Hulk in court in the Marvel Universe.
Matt Murdock is a lawyer, sir, and he's going to be on anybody's side that pays him well enough.
Also a lawyer, also in the Marvel Universe. Matt Murdock is a criminal. He's a defense attorney. He would absolutely represent Boomerang for this.
If Matt Murdock were in this book, he would just be trying to get Layla's phone number.
That's fair.
And then he'd be like, "Wait, the rest of you are fighting the Kingpin. He's going to screw you way worse than I could." Carry on.
I'm just going to tell you right now that you may not have had a chance to listen to my episode of AI Rights where I had Spectre become the health inspector for a subway. That's fine. But I will tell you this much: there is definitely going to be an AI Rights on Matt Murdock representing Boomerang being held in a power dampening cell, and we'll just see what our artificial intelligence what kind of craziness it can come up with.
I mean, it'll come up with some craziness. Won't determine anything. Listen,
no, I'm not asking for determination. I just want to be entertained by the fucking story.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. But like all I'm saying is like he should be kept somewhere that is for high security prisoners that don't have superpowers.
Okay.
They don't put the Punisher in this thing when he goes in there. They put him in a super fucking like non-powered prisoner. U.S. agent in like No Escape talks about that when the Commission on Superhuman Activity sends him against the Punisher. He's like, why am I going against the Punisher? He doesn't have any superpowers. I mean, like superpowers are a thing. If Boomerang indeed does have superpowers, he needs to be in there. But if this is just a skill that he's that good at, you need to treat him like just a normal, dangerous criminal, like you would anyone,
I got you. I'm sitting here thinking like they don't have anywhere else to put this motherfucker right now, because for some reason I feel like there's got to be a mid regular cell, super powered cell. There's probably a mid somewhere in there,
right?
So that's where he's got to go. That's Dean's. That's what Dean would argue.
Like I said, the technology that is involved to keep people from utilizing superpowers, I don't know. I would wager that, like, in regard to the way that we treat prisoners and their needs and their concerns, even though they are people, I promise you, no one has super looked into this. But if you have to put off power, it doesn't give off radiation. Does it give off gamma rays? Or they're like, think about the Marvel universe. You could be exposing a normal person to a thing that will give them superpowers.
No, good point.
I mean, so like this is dangerous for like lots of reasons, not just the prisoners' rights. That's where I always start there. I'm a human rights guy.
Right.
I mean, obviously, as y'all are well aware, but it grows into like other things, especially in the Marvel universe. He should not be kept in that cell. He's 100% right.
Oh, what was I thinking? They didn't disclose where he was at, though. They said he was on his way to the raft, right? It was the raft they were planning on putting him in, or the vault?
No, he's being held at the real New York Detention Center because he's got his trial coming up.
Okay.
And the not that it matters. The raft's not in continuity yet, but Danny Fingeroth, the writer of this, created the vault, but that's in Colorado. You only go there if you've been convicted, and that's a big thing in Thunderbolts, where it's like every time they need a new recruit, they go break someone out of there.
I got you.
That's another issue that comes up in like the vault too, is the Wizard like sues them again and again because he does not have superpowers. They keep putting him in the vault.
Oh yeah, the Wizard. The Wizard's another one that I never understood. It's like
not a big Wizard guy here either. Like,
I get in the 60s. You're brilliant, you're angry, you do some stupid stuff. But if you can create something that can effortlessly undo gravity, there's gotta be 100 different, like, why isn't there a story where the Wizard's like, I retired, I'm a billionaire, I own an island, I routinely lend money to other people to annoy you, I am legally not culpable, please leave me alone, Mr. Fantastic.
All right, let's get into issues 3 and 4 here. So Spider-Man, remember where we left him off previously. The bomb is about ready to blow, but Spider-Man is luckily able to defuse the bomb just before at the abandoned warehouse, saving the district attorney. Meanwhile, the
1/100th of a second left, right?
Oh yeah, he cut it close. Meanwhile, the syndicate discusses a new plan to free Boomerang, and this one isn't going to exactly involve a prison break. That's not the plan here. They've got some people on the inside, but their next job is an assassination scheme. Rhino, he finally makes a decision. He's leaving the group. He's found some people that are going to help remove the suit, and he's done. Layla begins to manipulate Speed Demon into believing that he has a shot at some romance there. But as Dean said earlier, I'm not really crying over Boomerang.
Gotcha!
Boomerang's lawyer makes a deal with the Shocker, by the way. And this is where the Shocker comes in and helps Boomerang escape prison.
Unwillingly.
Yeah, right. On the way out, of course, they run into Layla, who's waiting there with the getaway van. But anyway, she explains, and we learn that she intends on using her position to take revenge on Beetle after the way that he treated her husband, the Ringer. The way that I got it was that Layla felt that he was humiliated. The Ringer was humiliated, and that eventually led to his death. So she blames the Beetle for that. Elsewhere, Rhino struggles to remove his suit and continues to fail, while the Shocker encounters Spider-Man and, put this in quotes, the Scourge. Later, a large fight begins between the two factions of the Sinister Six. Now, you got to think, at this point, there is a breakup that happens, and I don't think the synopsis covers this very well, but there's kind of a breakup between the Sinister Syndicate here, where it is Hydro Man, Beetle, and Speed Demon versus Layla, Rhino, and Boomerang. And one of the things that I want to make that I don't think gets across here either is that Rhino's trying to get his suit removed, and the Beetle shows up and kills the doctor that's trying to remove his suit. So obviously now Rhino's pissed at the Beetle, which he has no problem putting in with Layla to get revenge there. And of course, Boomerang's going to be on Layla's side as well. But this fight begins and it spills out into the streets, and there's a ton of chaos. I guess it's during rush hour, and the police start to get called in.
Listen, let me say this about that. There's no way it was rush hour in New York City. There were cars moving before this started. You know the New York City joke, right, Jesse?
Tell me.
Nobody drives in New York. There's too much traffic.
I love that they have lines like, and then the van was able to disappear into the crowd or whatever. You can't possibly get from any of the areas downtown or in Midtown where this is in a random van and expect to disappear. To say nothing of the fact that they keep referring to their base being in Washington Heights, which is all the way at the top of the island. So Danny Fingeroth is well versed in New York. So none of this makes any sense whatsoever. It has to be said.
The movie Baby Driver is the same with Atlanta. Like, I lived in Atlanta for 14 years. I lived there when it came out, and this guy's like, they're saying like, "Oh, we drove from Spaghetti Junction to Peachtree Street in like 3 minutes." And you're like, at 4 o'clock? You're like, "Fuck this is shit. He's lucky if he gets there by 7. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, what the hell? What are you talking about?" Like, so, and they would just say street names, which real street names, but like if you were there, you're like, yeah, not happening.
Bullshit.
Yeah. Unless you're overdrive. If you're overdrive, You know, I mean, like, all bets are off. Like if you were the guy with the knife from the Madison Square Garden concert in Carthage, you know what I mean? All bets were off that day. Those people were there thinking they were there to just have a great time watching Super Metal Death. And instead, this guy had a knife and Carthage was there, and the guy was ready to go. All bets were up.
I'm jumping in on this. Listen, all Rhino had to do was get in touch with that guy, and his suit would have been off in a couple minutes.
You're right. Shim. You know that guy did meth so he could stay at it a long time. You know what I mean? Like, he's looking for something to do.
Oh, man. All right. Getting into issue 4. I broke this up a little bit different. So the issue opens up with we've got the fight going on right there on the streets, the city streets of New York. Layla, armed with her husband's deadly weaponry, these rings that she could contract, and she could do all sorts of things with these rings.
I will buy the boomerangs. But there is something about the rings that I just start living. He's like, oh shit, here's a razor sharp ring. I'll cut your head off. This one's explosive. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? Who looked at the game of ring toss and was like, that's the key. That is the bridge to supervillain success. I'll throw rings on them.
Not only that, but they can contract, they can expand. Damn, the ringer.
Take that, hula hoop.
Yeah, seriously.
Layla, armed with her husband's deadly rings, confronts the Beetle, driven by a thirst for vengeance. Spider-Man swings into action. He actually saves Layla from getting crushed by a car. And I mean, it's just getting crazy, crazier and crazier. Now, Speed Demon and Hydro Man, members of the Sinister Syndicate, we've already covered that, break free from the restraints. So apparently something had happened where they were captured or whatever, and they join the fray, attacking Rhino and Boomerang. The battle erupts into a frenetic clash of powers and tactics, endangering innocent bystanders and escalating the adrenaline-fueled chaos. Layla, finally, is she going to get her vengeance here? She confronts the Beetle once again, revealing her deeply rooted anger and desire for revenge due to her husband's past humiliation. She aims to take justice into her own hands, threatening the Beetle's life in a tense standoff. Spider-Man.
I mean, listen, it's a serious moment, but it's just like, I have to avenge my husband. How? Doing the same dumb shit he did. The exact same dumb shit.
It's poetic justice. I want to strangle this guy.
That is one way to put it.
It's so random because it's like he didn't kill him. Like it's such a.
Even Reed Richards would have trouble making this stretch,
Yeah,
I mean?
it's just it's such a weird arc. Like it would almost be better if you had just if they had just made up a brand new character and not even referenced the ringer. Like, I don't know, you killed my husband on a job you did or something. Like, they show the Beetle's got no compuncture killing in this thing. So
Right.
It was very weird because it's like, oh, well, my boyfriend, who was a low-rent supervillain, was killed by the same guy the Shocker's afraid of, but he's not even going to be in this book, except he is at some point. Did you guys notice at one point the Scourge seems to show up and the bullet bounces off Schultz? I was so confused by that. I don't even remember that from the last time I read it.
Well, I mean, I know. I mean, I can tell you what happened if you want, but it is like a little bit of a wah wah wah.
Yeah, I think I've got that in here. If not, we'll talk about it here in a second. But so yeah, Spider-Man shows up and he's getting involved here, and he finally stops Layla from killing the Beetle. As things heat up, he actually gets hit by one of Boomerang's high voltage boomerangs, further intensifying the danger. Spider-Man, though, is able to capture Boomerang and prevents Layla from choking Beetle to death. Using his web shooters, he immobilized Layla, ultimately ending her quest for vengeance. While Spider-Man manages to do this, he captures Boomerang, saves Beetle. Speed Demon and Hydro Man escape the scene. They get out of there. Rhino remains unaccounted for. Where'd he go? We don't know.
He's an easy guy to hide. So
Very easy.
That's what I was sitting there thinking. I'm like, how did you lose that dude? But he's gone.
yeah, this like 8'7", 933-pound Rhino guy. We can't find. To be fair, it's New York City.
If he took off running,
I mean, like, there's a lot of listen. We see a lot of characters around here, buddy.
Nah, he wouldn't run. He would just go into the subway or something. Like, there's no
Right.
running. Like, he'd just be like,
Right.
he'd be like, oh, great, that's the 6th train. Just goodbye. You know, no one's even gonna look at him sideways.
He would put on a hat. That's all he would do.
He's got that big and tall Ben Grimm Kid Toucher jacket, and then he puts a little hat on that sits on top of the horns. He's all set.
Yeah, he just sits there on the subway, and no one talks to him, and he doesn't talk to anybody, and that is the compact that every New Yorker makes.
Yep.
So at the end of this is where we find out that the Kingpin had orchestrated all of this all along.
No way.
Believe it or not. And it turns out Rhino came to ask him for help. And that's kind of what spurred him to be like, okay, Rhino, here's what I want you to do. Rhino was able to get his suit finally removed, even though the Kingpin intentionally said, for doing this, I'll have your suit removed. That wasn't the plan either. He looked to use him as another pawn by purposely having it fail. The Rhino, though, catches on to that and says, oh, you know what? How about I take your doctor hostage along with his family and make him remove the suit, like you said.
Do you remember the part where like they were like, hey, the doctors are talking to Rhino, overhears them, and they're like, yeah, too bad that other doctor that got killed, his crackpot theories really worked. What theories was he working on? What was he doing that would lead? What work was he doing like to lead up to like, I finally have come up with some theories and some science about how to extricate a giant human from a rhino suit that's been grafted to them.
Right.
Like what? Like because he's like, I've been working on this a long time. What the fuck are you talking about? And also, when did you have time? You had that big gambling debt.
Oh,
So,
right.
like, is that all he did was like gamble and theory? That's it. But like, it's just funny.
How much money do you have to run up on a gambling debt for someone to hire 6 supervillains and be like, no, even if he's got the money, I don't want it back. I just kill him, and then you take whatever money he's going to give you, all 6 of you. It's just too much plot in this book. It's just stop it. Just dial it back a second.
I think Kingpin set that up.
Oh, okay.
I think that's in the book that like he's the one who like put it around because he wanted him go like so, and again I love the book and I love Kingpin, but you're not wrong. There is a little too much like, man, the Kingpin, like some of this stuff gets very circumstantial. Like, oh, so the Kingpin saw that one coming and had a guy ready to do X.
Yeah.
Muy interesante, senor.
That's where the Scourge comes in that you were talking about, Derry.
Right.
Because the Kingpin hired somebody to pretend like they were the Scourge because he supposedly would say, what does he say? What is his key phrase?
Justice is served.
Justice
is served.
Okay.
So he yells that the Shocker's like, he knows that the Shocker's completely terrified of him, and so he just lays right into that, and that's why he does.
He also says the Shocker was a surprise, though. So he apparently had a guy ready on like 7 minutes notice. Like, hey, Kenneth, put on the fucking Scourge costume. We need you right goddamn now. Like, what the fuck? Like, so it's a little, you're like, okay, I'll let you have this one, Kingpin.
Right.
I've given you the 1/10 of a cent on a dime bag in Miami. I guess I gotta let you have this one too.
Man. So the final scene we learn where Rhino's finally got the suit off. It's been him and Kingpin have, a discussion after Kingpin sends him a bomb. He's like, I know where you're at, man. So just be aware of that. They finally have a discussion and they're like, our relationship is done. But the thing is that one moment where the Rhino thought he was going to die when he got that package on his porch, just made him decide to go back into the game. After all this time he wanted out, it pulled him right back in.
And like, think about it. That guy had the life. Like, he's ordering tacos
Right,
in
dude?
1991. There's no DoorDash. There's no Uber Eats. They're bringing him tacos, man. Come on, man. But, I guess you can't replace that adrenaline rush. I don't know. I do like how the Kingpin is like, listen, I tried to screw you, and so you screwed me, and I respect that. And I'm not good. I believe the Kingpin when he says, I respect that because I thought you were an O. So way to go, honestly. I'm not going to kill you, but I know where you are. And like, it's like, we mentioned Reservoir Dogs, another Tarantino movie, Pulp Fiction, like after Butch and Marcellus Wallace's encounter with the Gimp and the pawn shop guys, where he's like, what about us? Well, there is no us. You're going to get out of town. You've lost your LA privileges. Like, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like, we're fine, but like, let's not pretend like we're friends next time we talk.
Yeah.
But let's also not pretend like Kingpin won't hire him.
Right. Right there it is, folks. I mean, at the end, Rhino calls Justin Hammer. He's like, hey, I need a new suit. And that's kind of where we end things. So we have gone on a wild ride here with the Deadly Foes of Spider-Man. So I'm going to throw it to you first, Derry. What are your thoughts here, man, on the whole book?
I love the Sinister Syndicate because I love watching all these random guys get together and fail completely. I think there's a great Sinister Syndicate's a very Spider-Man idea where they don't accomplish anything they really set out to do. They keep getting in each other's way, and then they barely come out better than when they started. It just feels like a big Spider-Man story. Like I said, I think the Deadly Foes really set up this great idea of the interconnected Marvel underworld, and it leads into bigger and better things. But this is a great 4-issue series. This is one I've gone back to repeatedly. And Dean mentioned this before. before, but the art really is good. It's not what you think of when you think of 90s art. Again, it's definitely in that transition period, but it's well done. From a storytelling perspective, splash pages are used very well. The reveal of the Kingpin early on in the first issue is a great scene. Everyone is in their classic costumes for the most part, and everything's really sold well. The thing I will say that to this day I still don't get is the ending of what Kingpin actually wanted. I don't think we mentioned it, but he gets copies of discs that tell him every covert operation.
Right,
I guess
dude.
some branch of the federal government or some agency is doing.
I think everything. Apparently, they were
Everything.
all on this these 3
Everything.
discs or 4 discs or whatever. It was like the Omega Drive, but for good guys.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's exactly what it was. Yeah. Apparently, in 1991, there were 5 floppy disks in the 21st precinct that would give you every single piece of information you'd want on law enforcement. But it's so weird because it's not set up. It's not an obvious win. It's like, okay, I kind of figured the Kingpin was going to be able to outsmart these 6 guys, but for such a weird thing. That's what I meant when I kept saying like too much plot. Like, and Dean said this too. Like, spend more time with the characters. Like that's what I like. That's what you like in crime movies. It is nice when they win occasionally, but for the most part, you're there to see, how they're going to at least try to pull it off. So that would be my one complaint. But again, that's just a factor of the times. That's just the way things were
Yeah,
written.
I mean, I think another thing about crime movies when they're about criminals, it's like I said too, like when some of them form like a nice bond, you can like identify with them a little better, a little differently. They become more, hey, there may not be much of a difference between me and this like baseball player who throws boomerangs that have bombs on them now for money. Crime movies do a good job of that. This didn't do as good a job of it, but I think but you're right. It's just very plot heavy. There could have been more of that.
Like I said, if you're listening to this and you really enjoyed this, The Superior Foes of Spider-Man is a great book. That book has art by the absolutely amazing Steve Lieber. I would definitely recommend it because it pays off on a lot of the relationships that are set up here, and the the Shocker is a delight in that book. He was a personal favorite, but yeah, solid book. I was very excited when Dean suggested it. It did not disappoint, and I think everyone should give it a read.
Why is he the Shocker? Like, he doesn't have electric powers. Like, I know, like, he's like he vibrates.
Well, because the comics code wasn't going to let him be called the Vibrator, Dean. I think that would be pretty obvious.
Right. I mean, that makes
right.
sense.
That's you can almost picture John Romita sitting there. I've drawn this cool quilt character, and he's got these.
He does look really cool.
I'm generally a fan of Romita's designs. I mean, he designed that cool look for the Kingpin with the dinner jacket and the scarf and the little gem. He designed the Shocker. He designed the Rhino. I think Romita Sr., I mean, again, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said 100 times before, but I think he did have a great sense of design. He was a great follow-up for Ditko.
Whatever you want to say, good or bad, about Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, there's one thing you can't deny. He dresses for success, and I respect that.
Yeah.
I respect that.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, I think this book is it's a really good book. Solid, B, it's a lot of fun. The art's good. The plot is thick, but it is, it's fun. I think one of the things that really struck me about this as I was reading it was that, when it comes to superheroes, as a general rule, when we talk about who has the best rogues galleries, it's almost always like Batman, Spider-Man, and Flash. Those tend to be the ones that get the most play, as who's the best. What do they all have in common? They all interact a lot. Like, if you look at Flash, the rogues are all pals and they all do things for each other and have their own relationship. The relationship between like the Joker and the Penguin, or the Joker and the Riddler, or Catwoman and any of them, Mr. Freeze and the Joker and Two-Face. The Batman villains tend to have their own relationships independent of Batman. I don't know that we're starting to see, I think it's been established, but here's where we're starting to see it kind of be branded, for lack of a better term, that here's the way we're going to get the Spider-Man villains to that next level. They were already like A. We're going to make him A+ by having him interact even more. And I think when you really think about the best rogues galleries of all time, those three, that's the big thing they have in common. Other than, like, I swear to God, everybody fights somebody with like a boomerang. But like, I mean, but like for real, otherwise, I mean, or you have the boomerang, like you have the batarang if you're Batman, like there will be boomerang. But I think that's it. I think that's what draws people to, you know, to these guys. They're very colorful people with very flashy costumes, very over the top personas, and it just lends itself to being a lot of fun to watch them be somewhat skeevy. And so I think this is a good book. You can get a trade paperback that has like this and Lethal Foes in it for like $13, I want to say. It's totally worth $13, you know? I mean, like this by itself would, you get the other 4 issues. I mean, that's a whole other story for free, you know? I mean, like, you know, but I have a question for you, Jesse.
Okay.
So the doctor who like came up with the shit to like chisel Rhino off of Rhino, did he create Cyberforce?
I knew it was a Cyberforce question. I fucking knew it.
I'm just wondering, man. I'm just wondering.
I'm sure he was involved somehow. At least
probably was.
There was some research that was based off of what he did. Go ahead.
Do you think he invented the helicopter that Stryker shot in Cyberforce? Oh,
maybe.
I mean, maybe.
But all in
all, man, it's a fun, good book. It's not going to change your life, but I'd say it's better than just the popcorn comic.
Yeah. At this time, like in the 90s, in the early 90s, like I said, I was picking up Spider-Man at the time, at least some issues, but between Spectacular, Web of, and some Amazing.
No Adjectivalists?
Adjectivalists started what, 90?
Yeah.
I don't think I did. I mean, I may have, but I'm surprised.
You're like the only comic collecting dude in America who did it.
Polybag. Yeah, I hear you.
I was going through some shit recently, y'all, and I found the first like 14 issues of that run. I didn't know I had it. Yeah. Here's Todd McFarlane drawing Wolverine. I didn't know I had it. Like discovering treasure. I was like one of the Goonies.
The ones I remember, let's just put it this way. The ones I remember collecting, I remember seeing Hydro Man, specifically it's probably prior to this, but it was a Hydro Man that was drawn by McFarlane. So that was when he was doing Amazing before. Gosh, I don't know if I even seen, the Shocker I hadn't seen in probably forever.
Well, he was in jail.
Well, that's true. Okay, you got a point. He was in jail. You know, that all plays out in real time in the comic.
Right, exactly. One panel of a Marvel comic is 1 second of real time.
There you go. Rhino.
You never seen Speed Demon?
No, I hadn't seen him. Boomerang, I don't. Maybe seen him in the 90s as well. But the point I'm trying to make is like these were characters that I don't recall reading a whole lot of in the other titles. So I wonder if that was like, I don't know if that was a driving force behind like, hey, let's get some of these villains that, aren't being prominently used, give them a story. Rhino, I think I could barely remember.
It's very plausible. That would tie into kind of, what Derry said earlier, like these are mostly B-list villains, with, like I said, Rhino kind of being the bridge. It's a lot harder to do a Sinister Six book, not just for the reasons that Derry talked about. These are much more bigger personalities, A-listers who don't work well, they have their own plans and stuff, but also because like there are probably long-term plans for each of those guys. We have long-term Doc Ock plans. We have long-term Electro plans. Craven's dead at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, so like, those are guys that you might have literally 1, 2, 3 year plans for at this time to factor in and out of different things. Probably not a lot of people being like, I have big plans for Speed Demon.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even knocking Speed Demon. It's just, but that makes it to where you can put them in this book and do something with them.
Right.
Kind of like somewhere along the way, how like people figured out that like the best way to write Avengers or JLA was to like only have like 1 or 2 big guys in it. Or you go Grant Morrison, you just go ape shit the other way and try to keep up with everything. But like, if you look at like Roger Stern's run, it's usually like, Cap and Hulk, or Cap and Thor, but like sometimes they would both be there, but usually one would factor in and out, or like Dan Jurgens on JLA, Superman's there, and the rest of the guys are kind of just in the JLA. Guy Gardner had his own book, but that way you don't have to worry about other people having a bunch of plans. You're gonna fuck your shit up. You can just, if you want to do something weird with Hydro Man, hey, by all means, if you want to do something weird with the Green Goblin, probably have to talk to like 8 people, even in 91. So, you know, that makes them more palatable for this kind of book.
Right. Well, this has been fun, boys. Let's go ahead and get on out of here. Dean Compton, why don't you tell everybody about the Unspoken Decade?
All right, y'all, we're at the UnspokenDecade.com. I just published an article today about Brigade by Chris Armstrong. Blood Brothers, Brigade, Blood Strike, Rub the Blood.
Rub the Blood.
Really fun stuff. I hope that, like, one day I'll get as lucky as Battlestone and, like, I'll leave my job and not know what to do. And I'll just run into 2, like, really cool rich brothers with superpowers. Like, let's start a superhero team. All right, yeah, fuck yeah, let's do that. So hopefully that happens. But if it doesn't, you can look at a lot of superhero pictures at the Unspoken Decade on Facebook. And we're leaving Twitter. And we have a Blue Sky now. I have not got it all the way set up yet, but I can tell you what it is because I have that kind of information. So we're on Blue Sky at unspokendecade.bsky.social. So, I mean, you can probably just search for us. I haven't posted anything yet. I do have pictures up of the profile and stuff. So if you see Youngblood and Wolverine, you have found us. That's us. Don't be confused. But check us out there because we're leaving Twitter. It's a cesspool. It always was, but now I don't like. It's a different cesspool now.
Yeah. Hey, if you're listening to this podcast, you're most likely checking us out on the Unspoken Issues. Nope, that'd be the Source Material Comics podcast feed, where the Unspoken Issues resides, and also the Source Material Comics podcast. Mark Radulich and I just talked about Brian Azzarello's Luther, Man of Steel, and that was a good book. I think we're getting out of here. That is Derry Waite. That's Dean Compton. I'm Jesse Starcher. Thanks for joining us. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com and the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.